Hello there tankers and tankettes, it's me Iron Lord, and today I'm going to be taking a deep dive into my thoughts and opinions on the current state of World of Tanks console. But just to get out of the way, quick disclaimer, these thoughts and opinions are mine and mine alone. Additionally, one, I'm going to be critical of the game. I hold no ill will towards the dev team that's behind the game, or the wider community in general, including community ambassadors, community contributors, and the community management team as a whole. As you know, at the end of the day, they are just trying to do a job, and though I have issue with recent direction the game is going in and of past updates, which in my view have been have had a detrimental effect on the game's health, I do recognise that they are just doing a job, just trying to maintain community cohesion, despite the fact that it may be the case the development team have lost sense to where this game is heading, to the disappointment of the community as a whole. Though perhaps there are some people out there who like the new direction. They're few and far between, and from what I can see generally across the forums, across the Reddit, across even the Discord itself, you know, there is a lot of negativity at the moment, and you know, again, it's completely understandable why. So you know, without shitting on the game as a whole too much and the people behind it, you know, let's dig in the trenches and find out. As a result, look into the wider state of the game. Now, to begin with, when it comes to World of Tanks console, it is a game I've been playing for the better part of 8 years, and a game I've poured my heart, soul, wallet into over these years. Not perhaps to my benefit, so I may come across as one of those angry boomers you see on Twitter, Reddit, and the forums, but despite that, and despite how toxic some of the criticism of World of Tanks console has been recently, just know you know, it's not without cause. Again, a lot of this criticism is justified. Some of it does go a bit too far, but then again, that is to be expected. You know, when you have a community that has, you know, seen this game go through so many ups and downs, and as a result, you know, it's expected. You know, people are a little jaded these days. But either way, let us begin. So, World of Tanks. You know, what was targeting the audience? Why was the game better 5 years ago than it is now? And when it comes to the overall state of World of Tanks console, in my view, you know, why was the game better? In a better state 5 years ago, or at least, or at the very least, you know, between the period of 2013 to 2016 than it is now. Well, you know, quite simply, it seemed at least back then that the game had a sense of direction. You know, content was typically directly ported from PC with minor balance adjustments here and there. The game tried to keep the idea that while gameplay was RNG dependent and arcade in nature, tanks were added to the game. You know, that were added to the game, at least kept the mantra that even if they were unrealistic or ahistorical, you know, looking specifically at, you know, the Weapon Trigger Alpha E100, the T28 prototype, the Panzer E100, among others, you know, the vehicles that were added were at the very least modeled realistically, regardless if the tank was an actual real-world design that saw a service blueprint or mock-up or even a wargaming fabrication. Vehicles were usually given semi-realistic stats when it comes to performance of such vehicles regarding the view range, rate of fire, and mobility, you know, based on the characteristics of that vehicle, such as, you know, did the vehicle have a commander's controller, you know, with 360-degree vision, you know, etc. What was the engine power and all that sort of jazz. And when it came to obviously gameplay and things like that and balance, yes, some minor alterations here and there were made to, you know, basically ensure that the game was balanced. For example, you know, in the case of the Tiger 1, you know, nerfing the pen stats of the L56 and the L71 from its real-life counterparts, just so again they equate to more, you know, average performance. And as a result of some of these, you know, minor alterations and things that have been made for, you know, the set limitations that were implemented by Wargaming and the development team, certain vehicles like the Tiger 1, for example, were given the, you know, an ahistorical 88mm L71, which was actually the Tiger 2's gun IRL instead of the L56 as a top gun, just to compensate for the fact that, again, you know, these nerfs and alterations were put into place for gameplay balance. Now, in regards to that, you know, with the game also, you know, when it came to battles, things like that, also attempted to ensure that battles took place generally on maps inspired by real-world battlefields. And the gameplay itself was also semi-slow-paced, tactical sort of tank battle game, you know, where it was arcadey. There was a lot, actually back then, a lot of you know, strategy involved. The game was a lot slower paced. You had to like sort of think about what you're doing, and the result of that was, you know, again, the game was amazing. It was like a really enjoyable sort of tactical sort of experience, though arcadey in nature. Like I say, the game back then, at least the last 5 years, at least 5 years ago, was a lot different than it is now. Now, again, it's only natural that over the years, you know, the implementation of new vehicles, you know, and new lines, some of which again were historical, but have like, you know, gimmicks and stuff like that. And again, with those new vehicles, you know, changes within the map design itself, you know, it seems sort of like a mutation and degradation of these sort of, you know, the tactical, slow-paced gameplay that used to exist in favor of now a more like twitchy sort of, you know, reactive sort of game, which it has only been compounded by recent changes, you know, from 6.0, you know, the fact that, you know, pretty much everything's a laser beam now because of accuracy changes, the fact that because of that, and the fact that maps these days tend to be at least a lot smaller, or at least smaller compared to maps of the past. The game as a result is a lot faster paced as well. And the thing is that this game's been going on in this direction for a long time, you know. Whereas, you know, it seems that over the years, at least, that wargaming, instead of, you know, favoring the whole, you know, this is game slower paced, is more tactical, you actually have to have, you know, knowledge of, you know, of tanks, the, you know, penetration values, armor values, and of course, you know, gameplay mechanics as well, like, you know, bush mechanics, armor mechanics, you know, normalization, all that sort of jazz. It seems that over the years, that's been going out the window in favor of just making the simplifying the game to an extent where it's now just tank go boom. You know, that's the way it feels like at the moment. You know, and all this sort of started a long time ago, you know, with, you know, when they added a bunch of like corridor maps to the game. They removed weak spots from a lot of vehicles with the HD models back in like 2017-ish, 2016. You know, for example, the KV-1 used to have a weak spot at 76mm on machine gun port. That's gone, that's not there anymore. The weak spot on the driver's port on the BKB doesn't exist anymore. It's just all one flat armor value across the entire front of the vehicle. And with these sort of changes, you know, the game has just lost its depth. It's been, you know, simplified, and while obviously expect, you know, a game that's been running this long, like any multiplayer game, and we just look at Rainbow Six Siege as well as a more recent example, you'd expect the game to mutate over years, meta to be changed, etc. But in the case of World of Tanks, it seems that inside this mess of armored vehicles, and poor decisions from wargaming over the years, whether it be, you know, the lackluster updates such as 4.6, which completely crippled the balance of the game, and, you know, pretty much threw a bunch of, like, you know, what were considered competitive tanks to the bargain basements, you know, like with those updates. And then of course, then, you know, you had the world of reskins and all the other shenanigans, and then the, you know, the ridiculous, you know, mercenaries update, you know, in 2018 as well. You know, poor map reworks, the disappointment of, you know, disappointments of, you know, promising new content that, you know, never gets implemented, and then you have promising content like War Stories, which is actually, you know, was pretty good and was pretty cool concept, was then later abandoned and ruined because instead of, you know, using it as a way to sort of, oh, here's this like little storyline you can play, oh, here's a little way you can grind vehicles, you know, without, you know, handicapping yourself by playing stock tanks in the real game mode, and then rewarding you with, you know, free XP and credits and stuff, which is how, you know, when it was first initially added to the game. It then went to basically marketing low tier premiums for the sake of marketing low tier premiums. So it's like, oh, well then, you've spent 20-30 minutes playing this mode, and here's your reward, one-time discount on a tank that you've already got or don't want in the first place. And, you know, a result of that, you know, over these years, you know, it seems that World of Tanks wargaming, you know, spent a lot of time developing features that were either later abandoned and necessary to begin with, or just ruining the game, it feels. You know, and you end up getting to the point now where, you know, after all this mess and this disappointment over the years, it's to be expected the community is jaded, it's to be expected people are not happy, especially when it seems that wargaming seems to be have over the years as well been putting development time into temporary game mode instead of fixing, core issues with the game, such as game balance, adding new maps and porting content from PC, or even implementing community requested features or fixing bugs that have been prevalent in the game for years. And it seemed month on month, year on year, the game would just get more and more disappointing. After 4.6, we had like a series of just nothing. It was like a black hole. And then we got a few bug fixes, which then came, and with those bug fixes, the bugs just came back in the game anyway. And then were fixed again, and then they resurged, and then we ended up going to the point where it's like, 5.0 is coming out. 5.0 was meant to be this whole revolutionary game changer, which was meant to implementing cross-play and other features, and it only brought in more bugs to the game alongside a horrible and garish WWE tie-in. And as a result, we later got the Hot Wheels tie-in as well, which again both have no relation to the game. It's not really what the target audience of World of Tanks was looking for. I mean, you got to think, World of Tanks, when it first came out, it was a game targeted towards history buffs, people who just had interest in tanks. It was and people that were maybe a bit older and wanted a slower paced, more strategic sort of game. We didn't want WWE, we didn't want mercenaries, we didn't want Hot Wheels. All we wanted was World of Tanks. And that's literally it. Like, we just wanted the PC version on console. That is literally all we asked. And then, as a result of that, the stupid WWE modes, the horrible Hot Wheels tie-in, and all the other mess of issues that have occurred over the years. It seems like Wargaming is just pushing away people that fell in love with the game to begin with, and as a result, we are where we are now. Where Wargaming is trying to target new players and expensive people that are their target audience, the people who play the game, people that were interested in the game. Instead of trying to get Timmy from Fortnite to play World of Tanks, why not just focus, on your target audience? It just doesn't seem that that's what Wargaming is doing, and we've not seen any real major changes aside, from maybe +1 -1 propping up from now and again, and that's not even major changes, not being made permanent. And with all these horrible sort of updates that have gone on by time, again, the core issues have not been addressed. For example, balance, looking at maybe a way of trying to improve artillery for the general community, looking at the matchmaking itself. And I when I say matchmaking itself, I don't mean whether it's +2 or +1. I couldn't give a damn whether it's +2 or +1. What I mean is matchmaker just functions and creates balanced matchups, which it seems to fail at all the time. And the funny thing is, the ironic thing is, when Wargaming did actually try to take a stand and look into things, to try and improve the game, specifically, whether or not, artillery should, there should be multiple artillery in a platoon, which is something that is, again, really controversial. Personally, I'm someone who, while I have played in artillery platoons, and I will probably do so in the future, I really think that artillery should be limited 1 per platoon, because having 2 or 3 artillery platoon together is just too much power in the hands of a small player base, where it either will decimate your team or share 1,000 damage between them. It's just it's just one of those things. And when they did actually take a look at that, and they decided to limit artillery to 1 per platoon, which was overall probably one of the best changes that came, I think, in 4.8 or something. It was just before 5.0 came out. They pretty much reverted it within a week, introducing new bugs which weren't present in the game to begin with, which meant that your garage would constantly freeze up if you were platooned. You had to, basically leave the game and restart, which is just really not good to begin with. And that seems to be the trend when it comes to Wargaming at the moment. Either reintroducing or introducing bugs that shouldn't have been there in the first place, removing content that, again, shouldn't have been removed anyway, or just implementing these new features which are just underdeveloped and just don't go anywhere. And it is just really, really frustrating that, as someone who's played the game for years, who still sees the potential in this game despite all the screw-ups over the years, that it seems that Wargaming keep going in the direction where they just keep messing up. I don't know any other game studio or game developer that has messed up this much, like, so often, and gets away with it. Like, maybe you know, forgive Bethesda a bit too much as a publisher for, you know, the disaster that was Fallout 4 and 70, like, you know, Fallout 77, but or 76, what the fuck it's called. I can't really give a shit at this point. But you know, it's like it's really interesting to see that a studio that has like that what is a great game and well, or at least ported what was a great game to console, just screw it up so much, and it is something that is, you know, just really disappointing. You know, so like, and that's pretty much where we are. And this has only got worse. You know, 6.0 is probably, you know, the most controversial update that came to the game, which, you know, again was meant to be this whole big thing. Oh, you know, we're gonna fix your issues. We're not gonna do these stupid tie-ins anymore. And which, to be fair, they haven't done really many stupid tie-ins. And, you know, Hot Wheels, I think they learned a lesson on that, and we actually got good season pass content. And to be fair, the season pass is something, you know, that I can get behind and something I do support. But it's just like, when it comes to the game, you know, while it's really frustrating to see, while PC over the years has improved due to updates to, you know, the HUD, updates, you know, to the physics of the game, you know, new graphics, new maps, new content, it feels like the console version of the game is like a decade behind, and while it did look a bit better than it did, it's still kind of ironic that, like, for the longest time 360 was being supported long past the sell-by date and holding the game back, and even the wargaming devs themselves even admitted, yes, we can't implement these features because we're supporting 360. Yet when 360 was dropped, you still haven't seen these new features that come in, like, you know, like last spotted on the mini-map, things like that. It's just, like I say, it's just disappointing. And, you know, meanwhile, we did get a promising update, you know, with Valor, which I believe came in just before 5.0, which, you know, seemed like a return to form, and then it was forgotten only a few months later after only a couple of balance changes, when it was meant to be this whole thing where we're going to be doing like weekly balance changes or bi-weekly balance changes, so, you know, to keep the game fresh, and, you know, we're going to listen to the community. It didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And, you know, as a result, we got the changes that are introduced from 5.0. We got more of the same, more bugs, more what this, that, and the other. We did get a few lines port from PC, mainly the British Light Tank line and recently Polish mediums, which is, you know, kind of nice. But again, it seems that the pace of content coming from PC to console, well, it used to be like every 6 months in the past. It's now like 2 years to get something that, you know, get free tanks. It's so good. And yeah, it's just like I say, it's just really disappointing to see this is where the game is going. And, you know, this is before you get onto the joke that was, you know, 6.0, and yes, 6.0. Why? Just that's my only thing I can say is why. I mean, granted, you know, we did get, you know, the newer, proper, you know, improved battle passes, which were, you know, a lot better than the joke that was with thanks Hot Wheels. Like I say, honestly, who asked for that, I don't know. And, you know, it was quite refreshing to get some, you know, graphical upgrades, you know, the 3D skins, the additional performance slot if you're willing to sacrifice HUD elements, you know, like the outline and pen marker. And, you know, we did see, you know, some useful changes in the crew rework, such as, you know, crews being always 100% trained, so you don't have to, like, you know, retrain a crew for 50%, which has hampered your performance, or spend 100,000 credits but then have to grind another 20k XP to get the crew back to 100%, or, you know, also like remove the whole, you know, if you want to transfer this crew to this tank, you have to pay 1,000 gold thing, which is rather good. You know, setting it basically so you only have to pay like 9k silver instead of 1,000 gold to transfer a crew within, you know, same nation tanks, which is, again, kind of nice. And of course, you know, we did get a change to the module system, which is something that I've personally been requesting for years. I mean, the fact that for the longest time we couldn't use, you know, the SU-100 in its proper config, you know, with the top engine, 100mm gun, and obviously being fully upgraded before you always had to sacrifice engine power, or using an alternative setup on the TVP VTU, such as using a stock turret with the top gun, but everything else was upgraded to get more gun depression and being more flexible. You know, instead of, you know, in the past where if you wanted an package be implemented, it would either not be implemented, or you would request it and it would take months and months to come into the game, or in some cases, you know, when people suggested packages, it would just be a troll config like the T29 fully upgraded with the 76, which I remember was implemented at one point as a package before the 90mm option, which was, again, that was something. And you know, which was all sort of ridiculous, and of course, you know, with the multiple system, you start, you know, bypasses that, and at the same time, you've got reusable consumables to an extent, though they're not implemented in the way I would see as ideal. Personally, they should just literally copy paste the reusable consumables from PC, just literally left it the same as PC. Just that's all they should have done. Instead of making the premium consumables reusable, which does sort of implicate elements of pay to win, but again, you know, that's a whole can of worms I don't really want to get into. And at the same time, you know, while we did get these really cool changes here and there, it came at a cost, you know, which was unforgivable. Because the other side of the crew update wrecked elite crews, and instead of giving, say, an 18 skill crew the equivalent in the new system being 9 skill, and then sharing the XP for the next closest crew down, you know, to that sort of peak 9 skill, you know, the crew XP was sort of redistributed randomly, making no real sense, gutting people, you know, well, gutting crews that people have worked hard to, you know, elite or get up to a good standard, or even put money and time and effort into perfecting. And so we ended up with either, if you say had a lot, you know, pretty much every crew in your high tier tanks was elite, it was pretty much fine anyway if you only played a certain amount of tanks. But if you were like a collector or someone who had a lot of tanks across a lot of tiers, it just meant the XP just went everywhere and nowhere according to some random algorithm, which basically meant that your crews were kind of screwed. At least initially for the first couple of weeks, until people, you know, ground up new crews and etc. When, you know, personally, what I think Wargaming should have just done is just, you know, implemented like a free crew XP system and converted all previous crew XP to free crew XP, so that, you know, you could reassign, re-implement stuff accordingly. And you know, that's before we sort of get to the other side of the crew, you know, crew system, where it's just more generic now. It literally is just more generic now. Like, you're only going to be using about, given that you now have a 9 skill limit, and yes, 9 skill crews are as good as, say, 15 skill crews in the old system, if not more effective. But like, the thing is, you're only going to be using like 6 skills in pretty much every crew, and it's just generic. That you're just going to be using your smooth ride, your snapshot, steadying, your rapid fire, and potentially situational awareness, and Broken Arms, of course, just to, you know, min-max your accuracy, your gun handling, and give you range and all that shenanigans. And then you're left with like 2 or 3 skills, which you can then use for whatever else, whether you want to use Sixth Sense. Though I personally not use Sixth Sense since the new system came in, it's just a waste of slot in the, when you can use other stuff. Or you can use maybe camo level shot on a light tank or TD. That's literally it, you know. Whereas before there was a lot more depth in the way you built crews, because you'd be like, oh, okay, you know, train Brothers in Arms, okay, I'm going to train repairs now. What do I focus first, recon or situational awareness? So, okay, I'll go for that, and then you just build up your crews gradually. Whilst now they're just, again, while they're pretty much 9 skill crews in the new system as good as the old 15, 16 skill crews, you just don't have as much diversity in terms of the way that you build them, and it just screams the whole thing Wargaming have been doing, which is simplifying the game and trying to make it more accessible at the expense of depth. And, you know, that's before we get to the unintended consequences of, you know, the buffs to the equipment, buffs to the crew skills as a whole, which basically mean it feels like everything plays the same now. Like, honestly, like, everything seems to play the same. Like, it doesn't matter if you're playing a British tank because there's good gun handling, because you can play a Soviet heavy and have the same gun handling because of the crew buffs and equipment buffs. It's kind of it's just generic. Everything seems to feel the same. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoy the game, and to be fair, you know, the whole making everything pretty much more accurate to compensate for RNG is sort of, again, something that is kind of nice. Again, it's something that seems very inspired by another tank combat game that came out a few years ago, Armored Warfare. Though, to be fair, Armored Warfare on console did flop horrendously, though the PC version is still pretty alright from what I've seen. and it just sort of just, instead of, wargaming sticking to the core concepts of the game and, sticking to, what made World of Tanks great, it seems like they're just copying from other developers. And, I know they say, imitation is the best form of flattery, but it's really not. It's really not. And like I say, I kind of don't mind the whole twitchy gameplay. Obviously, I understand a lot of the other players that play the game obviously are not happy with it. It's just not World of Tanks anymore. It's the reason why quite many content creators had pretty much quit the game. Like, I believe retro people quit the game. A few other people quit the game. Fungi quit for a bit and then came back. To be fair though, I don't really know what Klongo's doing, but that's whatever. I'll leave him to it. And then you've got this whole now split where you've got half the community at Wargaming's throats, and then you've got the other half of the community which are just for up all these changes, or like, oh, this is really cool. That like, it just seems like they're sucking up to Wargaming when it's not really the truth, because both sort of sides have their own opinions, but it just seems that a lot, like say, the veteran player base at least is not happy with these changes, while the newer players like, oh, this is really good. And it's just not great. It's just not a great scenario to be in. And that's before we get to the other problem 6.0 brought in, like removing shared progression. That's fun. Having to grind, say, a mil XP to get a full 30U, and then having to research into other tanks on the same branch like the K91, which no one wants to play. Let's be real. Before you can even get to the full 30U, just kind of ridiculous. And then you've also got the other thing as well where, hey, you've unlocked this module on this tank before. Hey, you're gonna have to regrind another 100,000 experience to re-get this gun on this vehicle. For example, best example, look at the Object 714 to get the intermediate 152 D4S, which you got as a top gun on the ISG 152. You have to grind 168k XP, and this sort of continues on a lot of tanks. That's not the only example. The entire linear progression system is booked. It's just buggered, and then you end up getting cases well where there's bugs with it, the linear progression system as well, where if you say have already researched batch at 25T from say Lorraine, for example. If you want to elite your batch at 25T AP, you have to regrind out the XP for the batch at, even though you already have it unlocked. Yeah, that's the thing, and that is ridiculous. And yeah, that I wasted so much experience just doing that just to get the tank elite, and it was really pointless because it should have just been elite by default. Like, the whole fact that you have to research elite tanks now is just stupid, instead of it becoming elite automatically once you've completed the grinders. Again, that was just a stupid change. I have no idea why that was implemented. Honestly, I have no idea why. And from what I've seen, it doesn't seem that anyone else knows why either. Which is all really disappointing, because, like I say, when it comes to this, the whole shared progression thing, in the old pre-6.0 days, it actually offered a lot of depth digging, because you could often save XP and fast track a grind on another line within the same nation if you've already researched those modules and on the other line. So say, for example, if you were to grind, well, at least in the old days, if you ground for the British heavies first, you would unlock all the guns and the engines typically for the British mediums as well, which would save you a crap ton of experience and make the grind a hell of a lot faster. And then it also, if you knew about the whole shared progression thing, it basically gave you a lot of things. It was like, okay, what am I going to grind first? And you had to literally think about what you're going to grind first before you grind other things, because you never know, you could like literally fast track an entire grind, or like skip entire modules. Like, for example, in the very, very old days when the Awful Panther, or the Elf Panther, was a tier 7 tech tree tank, if you elited that thing back then, you would pretty much have the top engine for the E50 and the 75. Pretty much, like, it's just a fact you would. That's before they removed like the crazy 1,000 horsepower engine. But it was a lot to think about. And at the same time, with 6.0, alongside these screw ups of the shared progression, the fact they completely butchered the HUD as well, it was like, okay, the old HUD, yeah, it was a bit dated, but it worked fine, and you just kind of ruined it and implemented the new HUD, and the new UI, which is just it's just not great. And while granted, most of the new UI has eventually been fixed, at least that when it comes to the colorblind mode, at least that would. But that, like I say, way too long to be implemented. The fact it took 3 months to implement the colorblind mode, which was already in the game, is just yeah. I'm not gonna say much more about that. And then you also have the other issues where they're just like, oh, we're just gonna flat out remove content. Like various tier ones to fours. Despite whether these vehicles had any sort of historical significance or even um, a memorable part of the journey to tier 10. Just a band-aid an issue when it comes to balance and the new player experience, which was an issue that Wargaming created in the first place when they added the T22 Pro to Tier 1, which was the SEAL Club as tank of choice basically at that point, because they nerfed all the other Tier 1s, like the FT lost the 25mm, the T1 Cunningham lost its 20mm, the Low Tractor lost its top turret, etc. So you ended up basically nerfing all the other Tier 1s to implement a T22 prototype, which was just flat out better than everything else. In fact, it was, I'd say, is more capable than some tier 3s in some respects. Like I remember like just playing it, like fail platooning with it back in the day. Meanwhile, you proliferate like a billion T26s. No wonder new players don't stick around, because they got bullied for like 20 games and they quit. And it's not like any of the attempts to actually fix seal clubbing, like rebalancing tier 1 and 2s, or actually putting new players in a separate queue versus bots, or a separate queue with players and bots versus then the actual seal clubbers that just play their own whatever. There's like no attempt to really fix that problem. So best way to fix that problem is just remove tier 1s, 2s and select tier 3s and 4s. So you start on tier 3 now, which well done, you're still going to get seal clubbed. It doesn't fix anything. Does it shorten the grind? By like 10 minutes, yes. But, it doesn't really have any effect. And at the same time, you're just removing content for the sake of removing content. And, this carries on as well to, maps. Like, yes, I know the maps have been reworked gradually and being re-implemented, but, what's the point of removing 60 maps that only have then 8 in the game, and then add another 2 3 months later, and then stick with those 10 maps? Actually, it might be a bit more than 10, because you've got Himmelsdorf, you've got Vineyards, that's 2, Highway, that's 3, Steppe, that's 4, Malinovka, that's 5, that's in Prokhorovka, that's 6, Pilsen, that's 7. So you got basically about 10 12 maps in the game now. Because you've got Arctic region as well, and then Sand River and Castlevine. But you got this really limited map pool now, because you decided, oh yes, remove every map from the game, instead of being like doing what other devs would do, and like in other games where they're like, okay, we're going to be planning to rework these maps, and then what they would do is they would remove them on a cycle. So they would remove 3 maps, they would then rework those 3 maps, they would add them in, then they would remove another 3 maps, and then add another 3 in, and so you get this like cycle of maps, so you don't lose. Don't get a case where you've only got like a really tiny map pool, and as a result the game becomes highly repetitive as a result. And then again, there were other issues with 6.0. They wrecked the stats page in Garage, so you can't see your damage standing, you can't filter out tanks if you're trying to work for win rates. You have to literally scroll through every tank in the Garage, or through the stats page, and it's just a mess. The filters they added don't work. And then they also what else do they do? They removed commander customization, and granted that's sort of coming back now with 3D commanders, but even then it's like, why? You've removed it and you're bringing in this sort of tacky feature, but oh well. And like I said, I'll go into more depth about 3D commanders when I talk about some of the other shit in this game, like the mod tanks and stuff which is coming, which again I would love to be excited for, but I'm really not, unfortunately. But I'll get into that shortly. And then of course the new skills and equipment, as well, buffs to those. like I say, has completely changed the gameplay dynamic. And while I'm not too too disappointed with that, it's not like the worst thing in the world. Actually, kind of sort of like the way the game plays now, where everything's a lot faster paced and etc. But again, I do miss the old days of slow tactical tank brawls, and where you would be side scraping heavy tank would be side scraping. You had weak spots as well back then. At least there were more weak spots, because before they were removing with the HD models, and it was like a nice sort of like trade off where the first person to make a mistake would basically lose, and it was like really cool. But then alongside the equipment crew changes, they introduced a damage reduction skill in the equipment, which are like why it's like the equivalent of bringing back Juggernaut in one of the Call of Duty games. It's like if they were bringing back Juggernaut in Call of Duty Cold War or the next Call of Duty, everyone will be very pissed off. Why? Because it gives. It's one of those things where it literally will just give like an inexperienced or poor players a minor advantage, or give them a little bit more time to play. When instead of them learning how to play their tanks better or play the game better, they're like, oh, just slap on this thing so it turns into water low rolls and I can get an extra shot or two in with low effort. And it's just why, again, it's something that should never have been implemented. Again, the game should be favouring depth. Again, I've no problem making the game more accessible, but the game should be focusing depth and strategy and gameplay knowledge over everything else. Like you should be, if you want to get good in the game, where regardless of what game it is, whether it's Hearts of Iron, whether it's Spring Commander, wherever it's World of Tanks, Call of Duty, Rainbow Six Siege, any game you can think of. If you want to get good in those games, you should have to learn how to play those games. It shouldn't just be the case of, oh, I'm just going to drive forward and YOLO and do 1,000 damage and that's it. And that's when teams even are able to do 1,000 damage between them. But yeah, whatever. And like I say, combination of all these things, limiting that for all these other issues, the bugs and glitches that have come back in and were eventually fixed, but then came back in and were fixed again. It's just turned the game to like a really disappointing, repetitive mess, and more so than it's ever been before. And the ironic thing being that when a lot of features the community have been asking for, like since 6.0 launched, a lot of the features people are asking for, like hit points above tanks, and things like that, the colorblind mode, etc. It was all in the game before 6.0, so it was like. And this is what I mean is like when you have Pain Gold on stream, and I like I said, I don't want to shit on people, I really don't, but when you have people like Pain Gold saying, oh, we've made 400 bug fixes since 6.0 came out in December, or 400 changes, it's hard to believe. It really is hard to believe, because a lot of it is just reintroducing content that was removed in the first place, or making changes that were to things that were fine before. Minor bug fixes, and speaking of bug fixes, let's not forget the bug with the Centurion 7-1 turret, where you can literally pen it with HE shells from the Renault FT. Again, I've literally I read a forum post when 6.0 came out about that. In fact, that bug was in existence way before 6.0. I believe it was in the game since like 4.6, or even and it's not been fixed. It's not been fixed. Like, how could a bug that's so well known, that everyone has been reporting, that's been in the game for over a year, how has it not been fixed? It boggles the mind. And then you have all these issues. You have all these issues. And instead of actually fixing these issues, Wargaming still proceeding with the whole content plan, which has clearly failed by now, but they're still continuing with it. And yeah, there's not much else you can say about that. And the funny thing is, and unfortunately, with changes 6.0 brought in, they are here to stay. The only thing we can do is work the limitations and put forward suggestions to improve the game, which will, unfortunately, it feels like inevitably fall on deaf ears. Yes, I know Minto is, taking suggestions. Yes, I know, again, these changes will inevitably be made, but it's just, like, say, it's just really disappointing the way the game's going at the moment. Now, when it comes to it, like I say, I can only hope that 7.0 will be the tide turner, so to speak, and it will it will be successful and won't be a disaster. But at the same time, it is, like I say, really detrimental to the community that while these, like I say, it is really cool that we are finally getting the console exclusive content that is new, and not just a reskin or just a random tie-in thing that no one asked for. You still, like I say, have all these bugs that are in the game that need to be fixed, need to be addressed, need to be overhauled, and at the same time, with the larger effects of the balance augmentations that 6.0 brought in due to the obviously changes in the crew skills and equipment, the fact that while many vehicles have benefited, there are so many that are like falling behind the curve even more because, well, yes, they have got slightly better, but the competitive tanks like the Super Conqueror, Chieftain, etc., have just got even more better. So you're looking at the vehicles like the F325B, the K91, among others. They have really fallen behind the curve and do need to be looked at. And that's before looking at the ridiculousness of artillery, shall I say? As a result of these modes, and we do really desperately need an improvement to the map pool, even if it means adding Cold War maps to Legacy Game Mode, which again is something I'm more in favour for because these Cold War maps, from what I've seen, even though it's only 4 of them, do look pretty good. Or even bringing back unaltered original maps with pre-6.0 graphics to temporarily improve the map pool as sort of band-aid solution while other maps have been reworked and fixed. Because there are so many good maps that are just missing from the current rotation. Looking at Westfield, Redshire, Live Oaks, among many others. That ring a bell, like Sarogorsk. Even like Hyde Park and all these things, and then at the same time it seems that fixes to other aspects of the game as well as perhaps given maybe crew adjustments, maybe giving crews an extra few slots of the same current XP requirements, like say like 12 as an example, would be a good way just to give players the ability to diversify their crews more. Though, like I said, this would be super low priority compared to other issues like re-adding and remove content, even if it's like in a collector's tab like PC has done. Especially since it looks like they are planning to retire more vehicles in future. And at the same time as well, trying to find a way to re-implement other content, because at the end of the day, I've always felt that developers are constantly adding content to the games and not, removing it. Bug fixes like to the reload countdown, the random bug that causes your gun barrel to move when consumables are used. Of course, the Centurion 7 turret bug, among other bugs. Bringing back shared progression for previously unlocked modules while focusing on porting PC content to console, given we are effectively 4 lines behind PC at the moment, whereby weird vehicles, Italian heavy, Soviet double barrel heavies, and now Czech heavies, which are on the horizon in PC. We're not going to get those released for a long time, though I do believe Italian heavies and Soviet double barrel heavies have sort of been rumored to be released at least end of summer. At least that was the Italian heavies, was going to be end of summer, and then the barrel sometime later, probably in the autumn. Though again, that's not confirmed. It is really, 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 like I say, satisfying when these vehicles have been in the game on PC for at least over a year, in some cases 2 years when it comes to the wheeled vehicles, and when it comes to wheeled vehicles, while we've been told since 2018, oh, they are coming towards tanks, they are coming to the game. We've yet to see them. And granted, yes, there are some balance concerns with those vehicles, but even then, given some minor alterations plus perhaps the addition of larger maps, wheel vehicles could easily function alongside consistent map dynamics. And and alongside that, just to kind of end the whole rant about 6.0 and the current state of the game, I personally feel that the devs should have perhaps showcased more 6.0 when it was in pre-production stage to the community to ask for feedback as to avoid the launch that was 6.0, and instead probably should have perhaps adapted a hybrid system between the old and new systems to make a more suitable game that the community as a whole would get behind. And if they'd done that, I couldn't imagine that we wouldn't be in a situation today where literally 60% of the community, it feels like, again, I don't have accurate numbers, but just seeing from what I've seen on the forums, the Reddit, Facebook, various YouTubers, communities, it just seems super toxic now because of the fact that 6.0 released in the state it was. Granted, they've finally re-implemented the test program, that's good, the CCs have given their feedback, etc. So we may hopefully get a better game in the future, and hopes are that the new mode is a bit more polished as a result of that. But at the same time, it does feel that a lot of these things are, things that could have been avoided if Wargaming were more open with us. And yeah, granted, after 6.0 drop, they have made more of an effort. Props to them and so the community management, again, cutting through the BS that has been all this toxicity and all this criticism to try and get news to us, whether it's good or bad. And of course, hosting the multiple weekly live streams just to try and keep the community informed, which again is a step in the positive direction. Though, like I say, I do feel that Wargaming themselves are being stupid cryptic about updates, maybe because they don't want to show something off and have everyone crap on it. But even then, that would be the way forward, because it would be better for Wargaming to say, okay, openly, this is what's coming in this update, this is what we're planning, this is a roadmap for the next 6 months, and then for us to go, if we didn't like something, say, okay, this is what we don't like, and maybe again in the pre-production stage it can be fixed and adjusted, and then we end up with a better product as a result. So that's pretty much the gist of it, and it'll also probably avoid, if we had maybe a live test server, which is something I've always been wanting, or at least not something I've always asked for, even if it's just a separate client now we have to download, and it's up to ourselves if we want to download that client, whether it's say like a Wolves beta client now we have access to, just to avoid issues such as the golden bug among others. But like I say, we are a week away now from 7.0 and the Cold War era vehicles. My hopes are that part of the update will address player concerns and issues relating to the base game, and I have to say, from what's been so far, I am, really not as excited as I really want to be. And though, like I say, that could change when the mode does release, but despite the fact, I've been one of those players who have actually been kind of hoping for modern MBTs would be added, say, as like tier 11 to 15, say, for example, you finish T62A on the Soviet territory, you go into the standard T62, etc. And then obviously you just progress from there. It just seems that the implementation is a bit flawed, maybe a bit generic and a bit kind of unexciting. I do understand, the whole East versus West factional approach, because it just does make more sense when it comes to additional new content. It does simplify approaching a lot more instead of having to try and find a random vehicle that would go between, say, the Jet 65 and the C1 Ariete as an example. If you were to stick with just adding tanks after current branches. At the same time, the whole sort of content that has been chosen seems to be really, let's say, generic. It does lack diversity, and it is also really disappointing that half the new tech tree is literally vehicles that bring from the standard mode that you have to run. But well, yeah, not that, I'm not looking forward to that at all. Though again, it depends on what the economy of the new mode is. You don't know how much credit's going to cost to go through stuff, how much XP, if we're going to have more rules, or just going to research ammunition. We don't know. We'll have to wait till the 27th to find out about that. But in terms of the vehicles that have been selected, like I say, it is really disappointing that what could be classed as interesting additions, like say TAU or T64B, or even vehicles like the XM1 or MBT70 have sort of just been sort of sidelined in favour of a million T72 variants and a bunch of M60s, one of which is already in the game already. There's no, instead of breaking up a bit more, you go from the M46 pattern to the M47 pattern, and then you go to the M48 A3, but then say the MBT70, then M60, and then from MBT70 M60, etc., and then you work your way down there. You go M60 A1, XM1, and then you just go down that sort of more sort of diversified path. It seems like they've just gone the approach of just minimizing, or at least streamlining the amount of vehicles in the game, so they can improve assets and just change the model slightly to create multiple things. For example, you go from T72 Ural to T72B to T72, I think is the AV, and then you get the VU at the end of the line for well, Soviets, I mean, well, should I say Eastern Alliance territory, which is basically a T-90. But then again, even T-90 itself is technically just an upgraded T-72, so that's sort of fine, but there's like no interesting vehicles in between, like, you know, there's the T-80 and the T-64, or even light vehicles, like, you know, in the form of, you know, the PT-76s, or you can even have the additional IFVs, like the BMPs or BMDs, to supplement, you know, the territory effectively, and, you know, to have a lot more vehicles, or in the case of NATO vehicles, you know, whether the Challenger 1 or Challenger 2, the Leopard 1A5, Leopard 2, Leopard 2A5, or vehicles like the Bradley, you know, the actual Scorpion, you know, the actual Scorpion tank, the Scorpion 19, or other vehicles like the, you know, the XM8, the Stingray, etc. It does seem, you know, fairly simplistic at the moment. While no doubt we will probably see additional content come in the future, so I'm not that worried. I mean, when they accidentally made that error one of the previous updates, where they added the post-war marker to pretty much everything that was going to have that tag in the numeral, you know, they added it to achieve the M41, which leads them to believe light tank lines planned in the future. But again, you have to wait and see. So it doesn't, you know, the fact that this sort of, you know, generic sort of simplistic, you know, a lack of content when it comes to Euro doesn't really drive my interest too much. Unfortunately, I really wish it did. And then of course you get the 4 maps, which, while I'll have to admit the new maps aren't great, and I have always been asking for bigger maps, it does set for precedent that we probably won't see these maps in the base game mode for at least a very long time, if at all. Meanwhile, the base game mode is lacking in the map pool. So again, that again is something else that is super disappointing. And like I say, well, I mentioned earlier in the reintroduction of the customization of 3D commanders, I have to say, from what I've seen of 3D commanders, it's quite questionable, to say the least. And it's not like it's a bad thing, you know, having like a customizable avatar, that's fine. You know, a lot of games do that, it's no problem at all. You know, you want to have your, you know, like, you know, Forza's done it, previous Call of Duty games, you know, a lot of games have done it. Just to say that, especially mainstream games. I mean, just look at Fortnite as well. I mean, the whole point of that is that you customize your avatar and that's it. But you know, but it just seems the implementation from what I've seen so far, again, like I say, it could look better when the final product comes out. So it's sort of Battlefield, it looks like its final product. It does look tacky. It does really look tacky, and it does look like something from a budget, like a budget-y or like mobile game. And it's not personally what I would like to see, like, assets and resources go into, as resources should really gone to, you know, adding, you know, bringing stuff over from PC, maybe adding more elite skins, /3 styles, and, you know, again, just fixing the issue with maps. You know, this all I can really said. And while you know, it does look like we are getting co-op PvE mode, it does, you know, which does at least address the concern that a lot of players have had since the move of Warfare's and Proving Grounds, in regards to having a more relaxed, casual, like, you know, easy way of grinding stock vehicles without suffering, you know, PvP or being handicapped for the team. The fact that it's basically just random battles with this bots is little inspired. Like, you know, given what War Story sort of showcased and what they can do, especially the later ones, it would have been way better to maybe also, in addition to the co-op PvE mode, which is basically just the same as normal games, maybe bring back, like, you know, War Story type PvE missions that players can do, stuff like that, or even have like a wave defense mode or something. That, like, I believe that was actually in one of the old Proving Grounds missions before that was removed, and, you know, would just be a lot more interesting than what we have, and what seems to be coming into the game. And to be honest, it does feel that World of Tanks console is just turning into World of Tanks Legends, because it seems that a lot of the content that's been introduced, a lot of the gameplay changes are heavily inspired by World of Warships Legends. And while that's not a bad thing, it is definitely concerning, because World of Warships Legends does make several sacrifices over the original game to oversimplify it and make it, like, overly accessible. Just, you know, so it's, you know, well, not so it's playable on consoles, because even the base game could run on console, but just to try and, you know, make it so that, you know, it's like easy to get the grips with. But again, that's not what World of Tanks console should be doing. It should be, like I say, as everyone wanted it. Pretty much most, well, not say everyone, but a lot of people I've spoken to over the years, and a lot of people I know, I would say we just want bullet tanks. We don't want anything else. We don't want any bells and whistles. We just want bullet tanks. They'll be on console. That's it. That's the whole point. Like, that's what we want. We don't want any fancy gizmos. We don't any like stupid like simplified mechanics. And the hilarious thing is that even when the base game, pre 6.0, you know, the original game when it was in beta was simplified for console, but it was simplified in a way that it kept pretty much all the core concepts of the PC game, but just made it easier to navigate and stuff like that. Like, you know, having, you know, one crew member, like your commander, your train commander, instead of having 5, and but keeping off the old mechanics. And like I say, hybrid or old and new would have been the way to go. But like I say, I don't want to be over negative about what I think of console, but recent changes honestly filled me with a lot of doubt, and while upsetting the wider community as well, specifically core games in general. I honestly hope the developers take community feedback to heart, focus on making improvements where required, and quite honestly step up the pace of development. The fact wheel vehicles, like I say, have been talked about for about three years now, not been implemented, and you know, other improvements and features, you know, that have been mentioned over the previous months and if not years, still not made it to the game, despite the fact that one of the main limitations, which was Xbox 360, is just gone. You know, there's not being supported anymore. Again, it's sort of been quite dismal, and it is like detrimental to the game as well, especially, you know, with the lack of, you know, map additions. And while we are getting some new maps, like for the new mode, and LL Main is rumored to be coming back soon as well, in the summer. Again, the pace of introduction to new maps it's too slow. Like, I personally, I know obviously everyone's working from home. Even the development team, I didn't get that because obviously it is a pandemic. They don't have access to all the resources that they should have access to. But even then, a really good skilled art team, which I know Wargaming has, should easily be able to put, or at least bring back 4 maps a month, or even 3 maps a month, or hell, even 1 map a month would be an improvement. Let's be real. And like I say, there's pretty much the semblance of it. Like, you know, like I say, I do have to like say, like, as repeat a positive thing I did say earlier, that we're going to at least trying to be more open about the game, even if it's not obvious. And like I say, additionally, I do have to give my props to the community manager team, Minto, and among the community ambassadors and the CCs are trying their best to cut through all this criticism and all this BS. Because even admit, he has been getting really toxic recently, and at least he sort of give us some, you know, semblance of news and information, even if it's not good in general. But so I do have to give my props to that. But again, the core development team is going to need to step up the game. They really do. Because at this rate, from what I've been seeing the play numbers, it does not look good. It's not a healthy game. It's not like it used to be, where you used to have at least 50k people on Xbox alone. Now it's like, even with crossplay, you're barely seeing about 15-20k online at one point. Like, it's not good. It's not a good thing to see. Bree Boy, I'll leave the video here. Again, please make sure to comment below, share your thoughts and opinions in the comments, like and subscribe as well if you can. I'm sure I'll probably miss something again, and I wish I never had to make this video to begin with. But again, because I hate being negative about one of my favourite games, but it has to be said, I had to get off my plate, because otherwise I'll be ranting to my mates about it, and they'll be very, very pissed off at me. But like I say, hopefully in future, when I do make other videos, I will get back to the more positive original content. That's all I want to do. Again, I've been really slacking with YouTube. I've literally, you know, made a video in like a month or so. So I do want to get back to that. But either way, Panzer IV, and good luck on the battlefield, commanders.